Hello everyone, Namaste. Today I'm going to continue to read from chapter 17, from verse number 31 to 36, from Robhu Gita. So I will start reading now. One's own self is indeed that which has lost the characteristic of Jivatva. Jivatva meaning being an individual soul. I'll read that again. One's own self is indeed that which has lost the characteristic of jivatva, of being an individual soul. One's own self is indeed that which has lost its status of the characteristic of lordship, being Iswara. One's own self is indeed that which is the undifferentiated Supreme Brahma. One's own self is indeed that which is the undivided Supreme Brahma. One's own self is indeed that which is non-dual. One's own self is indeed that which is undivided, complete, and perfectly full. By such steadfast knowledge that oneself indeed is one's own self, I repeat that again. By such steadfast knowledge that oneself, meaning the ego self, indeed is one's own self, means true self, you yourself become Brahma, which is oneself, which is our individual self. Next verse. One's own self is indeed that which is without any conditionings. One's own self is indeed that which is without any conditionings. One's own self is indeed that which is without a speck of impurity. One's own self is indeed that which is extremely pure. One's own self is indeed that which is the beloved of all. One's own self is indeed that which is like the sky. One's own self is indeed that which is the infinite supreme self. By such steadfast knowledge that one's own self is indeed oneself, once will repeat the sentence again. By such steadfast knowledge that one's own self, meaning true self, is indeed the individual self, you yourself become Brahma, which is oneself. Before continuing to the next verse, I would like to say something that however much we may try to make ourselves pure, to go become without conditioning with the using the mind. Using the mind, we cannot wash the mind itself because the mind still remains when you use the mind to clear the mind. Instead, when somebody reaches the self, then only everything becomes pure. I think that is what is being referred to here. Okay, continuing on to verse number 33. One's own self indeed is that which transcends division and such. One's own self indeed is that which is established as the highest of the high. One's own self indeed is that which is without the delimitations. One's own self indeed is that which is totally pure. One's own self indeed is that which is a mass of knowledge. One's own self indeed is that which is the supreme Brahma. By such steadfast knowledge that one's own self is indeed oneself, you yourself become Brahma, which is oneself. So we are the self. There is no separate self other than us which we need to become to find out the truth. Next verse. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the eternal Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the partless Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the taintless Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the blemishless Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the intersticeless Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the afflictionless Brahma. One's own self indeed is of the nature of the all-pervasive Absolute. By such unwavering knowledge, you yourself become the Absolute itself. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is all. I indeed, excuse me, I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, devoid of all. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is the truth. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is ancient. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is changeless. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is permanent. I indeed am of the nature of the Supreme, which is peaceful. By such unfailing knowledge, you yourself become Brahma. Next verse, verse number 36. I indeed am of the nature of the Brahma, which is delusionless. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is without ignorance. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is devoid of the Lord, Ishvara. I indeed of the nature of Brahma, which is no individual, Jiva. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which has no walls. I indeed am of the nature of Brahma, which is peaceful. I indeed am of the nature of the pure Absolute. By such unfailing knowledge, you yourself become Brahma. So this is how it is being explained by the sage Rivo to his student Nidaga, and through this scripture we get to know this, to understand this scripture of non-duality and practice it and realize it. Thank you so much for listening. I will read again the next week. Namaste.